Good morning, one and all. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Very good. Welcome to the first session of the second day of Eco Build. We've got 5 speakers. Each speaker is going to speak for a few minutes about the topic, and then move on to the next speaker, and then we'll have a conversation. And a bit of feedback. I'm happy to do it either way. If you want to ask questions as we go along, as part of the conversation, that's great. Just stick your hand up and get mics to you. Or if you'd rather the session just went on for 30 minutes, then the questions came in, that's up to you. If you put your hand up at any stage, I'll take the question as soon as I can. I'm Will Gobberts. I'm the BBC's Arts Editor. I'm chairing the session, which is about affordable housing in London. How on earth do we get to a situation where people can, again, normal people with normal jobs can afford to live in London? When I bought a maisonette flat in London when I first got married, it was just off Regent's Park on Mornington Terrace. It was a very nice flat, and it was bought with my wife's mortgage, and she was a teacher. And it's about 85 grand, I think. And I saw it advertised the other day at £1 million. Same flat. It was a bit crappy then. It's a bit crappy now. But you couldn't buy it if you're a teacher. You couldn't get near to buying it if you're a teacher. So how can we resolve that problem? How can some of this panel help resolve a problem where for vital support services and different people in different jobs, you just can't begin to think about buying a house and living in London, and maybe even renting? So those are the issues we want to discuss. I think the panel are going to stay in their chairs for this because they're just short introductory remarks, and then we'll conduct the conversation from over here on the stage. Let me introduce you to the panel, starting off here with Jules Pipe, who's the Deputy Mayor of Planning and Regeneration at the GLA, and we'll obviously be talking about Sadiq Khan, I hope, and what the London Mayor said about housing. I think when he was on the stump bidding to be London Mayor, he said he wanted 50% affordable housing with all new building projects. I think that's now gone down to 35%. Obviously, there's big issues with that. We need to explore that in detail. Then Ben Derbyshire, who's a partner at HTA Design and REBA President-elect. Ben, congratulations. Susan Emmett, who was a journalist once upon a time for The Times. She launched Bricks and Mortar supplement in the Times, and is now a head of residential research at Savills, the estate agents. Jenny Daly is a director for land and planning at Taylor Wimpey, which need no introduction. And then on the end there, don't fall off, Graham. Graham Gregg, Commercial Development Director of Transport for London. Could you just give them a nice little round of applause just to warm them up? Great, thank you very much. Well, we're going to go in this order, and we're going to start with Ben and the GLA's view. Ben, affordable housing. Jules, sorry, it's Ben. Jules and affordable housing.
That's all right. You can go with Ben first.
I want to go with you, Jules.
Well, I'd want to start by saying that the Mayor's aim for affordable housing in London is still very much at 50%. It was in the election, and it still is now. It's a strategic aim of half of all new homes being built in London being genuinely affordable for Londoners. And it will be achieved through a variety of means. And the exam question for this discussion is, are the London Mayor's affordable housing requirements the best way to tackle the housing crisis? Well, it's certainly not the only way. It will be one of many, and it's a very good way to start. Because when you think that only 13% of homes given planning permission in 2014-15 were affordable. So you can't go from what is practically a standing start to achieving that 50%. Plus, achieving affordable housing in London, doing it through the planning, through planning was only going to be one route, and the contribution planning is expected to make is at least 35%. And that's why the new housing supplementary planning guidance has been brought forward, and it's been out for consultation 3 months now closed, and we're considering the responses. But what that is designed to achieve is to accelerate the overall housing delivery in the capital, increase the amount of affordable housing, embed the requirement for affordable homes into land values, making it easier to bring those forward, speed up the planning process for the right schemes, those that press the right buttons, including a good proportion of affordable housing. And it also sets out the basis on which public subsidy would contribute to increasing further the amount of affordable housing, even to above 40%. But that's just sort of one tool in the box that the mayor will be proposing to use. So there'll be funding powers that the mayor has to increase affordable housing, and also there's an expectation of a higher proportion of affordable housing on schemes developed by registered providers. And also those on public land. And I mean, one of those examples is TfL. And I have a bone to pick about, I think again in the exam question, in the blurb underneath, it said about a bid to increase affordable homes provision, selling off land cheaply. At the end of the day, no one's going to sell off land cheaply. A value is going to be achieved for that land owned by, for example, TfL. And it's just then a decision about how that public value will be spent. Is it on just transport infrastructure? Is it just affordable homes? Or is it a spread across the two? And it's a balance. But nothing's being sold off cheaply. It's just an approach on how the money is going to be used for the public benefit.
Ben, just a benchmark question for you. What is affordable housing in the mayor's terms? What does it represent? What are the sort of values we're talking about?
There's a variety of different models. There's London Living Rent, which is a new proposal.
How much is that?
That would be aimed at people on a maximum £60,000 household income. So, two people on 30k, for example.
But that's not going to help a nurse, is it?
And two nurses, a nurse and
a consultant surgeon.
Well, I mean, 60,000 would be the maximum, the absolute maximum. And there would be ward caps that the GLA will calculate, so ward by ward across the 600 odd wards across London, where the caps will be at the third of the median gross income for that ward as well, so a third of the median gross household income.
Okay, so just give us an example. So you've got, just 2 seconds. So you've the medium in Lewisham, say, is, I don't know, 32 grand.
The household income would be, if the household income for a ward, if the median household income for a ward was, in your example, 32,000, then the annual rent would be around £10,000. Yeah.
Okay. And then on the purchasing a house, what's considered to be an affordable home?
Well, on that would be the models we'd be looking at would be shared ownership, and so the
shared between a developer or the council and you, the owner? Or?
Well, it can. There are a number of different routes there. Some local authorities are actually acting as that other balancing owner within the relationship. Obviously, it's been more common in the past for registered providers to be that other owner.
Okay. All right. Well, can we just get through the panel, then come to your question? Then because we activate the microphones and everything at that point. If you don't mind waiting a second.
And Will, I should say that will be capped at 40% of net household income. What that would cost. So it's slightly higher because you actually are purchasing the property, but that would include all the payments on the mortgage and the rental for the part that you don't own. It will be capped at 40% of net household income.
All right, Jules, thank you very much. Ben Derbyshire, partner at HTA Design, your views. How can we solve the crisis, and is the Mayor's plan the right way forward?
Well, can I, first of all, speak on behalf of the RIBA rather than HTA Design, and say that our membership is very supportive, and the RIBA and the Institute very supportive of Sadiq Khan's approach to all of this. I think it's true to say that our membership has become growing uneasy about the way in which a previous set of policies were effectively attacking our ability as designers to create mixed neighbourhoods and eroding social cohesion. And indeed, I go so far as to say that for some of us, our difficulty is that our craft of urban regeneration has, in the minds of some, been equated to social cleansing. So it actually got pretty serious. And we're very, very glad to see the kinds of things that Jules is talking about and the Mayoralty is, I hope, going to deliver. First of all, on affordability, there is a crisis. We understand that 30% of your net income is about a sensible definition of affordability. In the private rented sector in London, people's expenditure is about twice that proportion. So they're clearly, and the private rented sector is now the biggest of all the sectors in London. So we think to aim for a deemed to satisfy minimum of 35% is a very good idea. We're very pleased to see behind us the kind of voodoo of valuation on both sides of a planning authority and a developer, because it's incredibly time-consuming and difficult. We endorse your idea of having a team of your own witch doctors in order to assist the local authorities in their negotiations, because it's pretty complicated if you don't do it on a kind of deemed to satisfy basis. So we endorse all of that. We think you should put a cap on the value of land that you sell in order that we can deliver according to differentials in quality rather than price, and we think you should sell land on a leasehold basis so that you, as a landlord, as a landowner, have a stake in the long-term future of the places that you create. There's a number of thoughts that we've got about your policies, which we very much welcome as an institute. If there's time, I've got a couple of ideas that I'd like to put to you.
Just on that from a REBA perspective, given that CABE is no longer with us, those are all suggestions and thoughts you have for the Mayor's office. Do you have any traction at all? Do you have any power? Do you have any levers where your thoughts are officially heard and considered as part of a conversation?
I would say, especially of late, and with our current President, Jane Duncan, we have increasingly good access to policymakers, and we are becoming increasingly influential. We are on a drive for more members, which means we've got a bigger voice, but there are 40,000 of us already, and the architects, like it or not, are society's answer to who shall deliver on the question of the quality and sustainability of the built environment. So the architects, in our view, are the people who should be listened to on the question of quality.
Okay. Have you finished your points?
Well, I've got a couple more if you've got time.
Very quickly.
Okay. A couple of ideas that Jules and his team are not currently deploying is the further intensification of our outer suburbs. We're doing some work which illustrates that with urbanisation around some of the suburban stations in out of London, which are currently at an average of 15 dwellings per hectare, that you can hardly see the houses for the trees. 15 dwellings per hectare. We could bring those up to an average work we've been doing with Savills, which would, over a generation, yield 700,000 new homes in a generation in outer London. That would add 30,000 new homes per annum to the amount that the GLA were able to supply if they were to deliver the policies that would enable that. That's one idea. The second idea, which I shall be, as a rather grotesque thing, we all troop off to Cannes in the south of France. It's terribly hard work, and we meet each other as a kind of clan of developers, architects, and so on. And I shall be there putting about the idea that London should have should host an international housing expo. The purpose of which is to give politicians the opportunity of saying to the public at large, look, this is what good looks like, this is what new homes in your neighbourhood could do in order to improve neighbourhood well-being where you live, and thereby turn NIMBYism into YIMBYism, and have a capital as a whole that is behind the push for more homes, rather than, as is often as not, on a neighbourhood basis, opposing them.
All right, Ben, thank you very much. Right, now, Susan, Evan, the estate agent's point of view will be fascinating, also from your journalistic perspective, from the Times as well. And just give us, overall, not only answering the question whether the Mayor's policies are correct, the way to sort of solve the housing crisis, but just what is going on in the market at the moment and what the implications of any rise or fall are.
Okay, just to start off, actually, I'm not an estate agent. I'm a researcher, and Savills is more than.
Can everybody hear Susan? No, nor can I. We can't hear Susan, guys. Okay, do you want to just try speaking, see what happens?
Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. No, so I'll just repeat that. I'm not an estate agent, I'm a researcher, and Savills is not just an estate agent, it's actually a very large property company that deals with all aspects of property, from, the planning side of things to development, and yes, we do sell houses as well. So actually, we see the market in its entirety. If you can put it on land, we do it. So that puts us in a really good position to see to look at the plans the GLA have put forward, and to gauge the impact it might have in the market in the future. And it is, it's my job to look at the stats and do the analysis behind that. So I think the first thing to say is that there is always a market context to any policy idea, and Jules is absolutely right in saying that we need more affordable housing in London. Everybody knows that. It's a no-brainer. We've done some analysis that shows that actually most of the development coming through is skewed to the top end of the market. So the stuff that's coming through the pipeline is actually quite high value. So at the higher end of the market, demand and supply is pretty much evenly matched, not all the way through, but it's better matched than at the lower end, where there's an enormous gap between demand and supply. So that does produce enormous problems, and something needs to be done about that. So I completely get what the GLA is trying to do with trying to instigate higher numbers of affordable housing coming through, to actually embed that in the land values. As you said, it makes complete sense to do that. But I do think there are risks, and that I kind of slightly worry that there might be certain areas where it might be counterproductive. So at the moment, housing delivery is increasing. We have built since the recession. London has increased the number of homes it's producing year on year on year. And we looked at the pipeline, and our latest analysis shows that last year we would have delivered 30,000 homes. Well, the current sort of figure everybody bandies about is that London needs 50,000 homes. In fact, we've looked at employment projections. We think that London needs 60,000 homes a year. So we are still delivering half the number of homes that we need. So I think we need to up production. I think that's the number one priority. And I do slightly worry that the combination of a slower market and sort of slightly more onerous requirement on developers might actually slow that delivery a bit, down a little bit. So that's
Well, because people will stop investing, developers will stop investing.
No, two things actually in terms of the land market is that landowners might not want to bring their sites forward because it's become less attractive for them. So what you might do is essentially, and this is getting a bit technical here, but create a two-tier market whereby the sites which have good viability, which where a developer can more easily deliver 35% affordable housing, which is the threshold above which they don't need to show their maths and their viability arguments. So those sites that work will come through, they'll get delivered, great. The sites that are slightly trickier will either stick, or I think the other sort of not trend, but sort of buzz we've picked up is that developers might look at other uses. They might say, well, actually, it's so hard for me to deliver housing because I've got to jump through so many hoops. Well, tell you what, I'll build some offices, I'll build a hotel, something else, which in a way is good because London needs more of everything. But it doesn't solve the housing crisis, and it doesn't necessarily, it means that it's not something that the GLA is controlling properly. So I think that's a bit of a risk, and I think we ought to look at maybe a bit of flexibility in the system.
Susan, given that we are talking about fundamentally an issue which is created by supply and demand, what's happening in the market? Given the concerns about Brexit, given the fact that a lot of the drivers behind the market have been foreign investment into London. Is that dissipating? Is that slowing down? Is it going away, or is that still charging forward and driving the top end?
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that the London market has been slowing. House price growth has been slowing. In terms of foreign investment, that's very much the high end of the market. People tend to, I think, overemphasize that because they look, it's a great story, but actually it's something that doesn't really filter all the way down. It is very much more focused at the higher end of the market. That said, London market, having outperformed the rest of the country for over a decade now, is slowing. The pace of growth is slowing, and that's because of affordability.
But not falling.
No, the house price, it depends which borough you're in and what stats you look at. So if you look at the latest ONS stats, prices in Hammersmith and Fulham have fallen. They've come off a little bit, and this is in the mainstream market. If you look at the prime markets, prices have, really, really like eye-wateringly expensive homes. Those prices have been coming off for, a while actually, for about 18 months. So pre the referendum, pre everything. So a number of factors that predate the referendum. So there are other things going on. It's not all about Brexit.
No, okay. Jenny Daly, Director of Land and Planning at Taylor Wimpey.
Morning.
Are you going to be holding on to your land?
Well, I think first of all, from a land point of view and moving land forward, as a house builder, we only recover our investment when we sell our units. So we don't hold land; we develop it. We've got 5 very active businesses in London, and the majority of those are active in the outer London boroughs. So, I mean, I could agree with almost everything that Susan has said in her introduction. The issue with planning policy changes and the way that they affect house builder behaviour is as interesting as the market itself. The introduction of a clearer, sort of more detailed approach to viability and affordable housing by the Mayor is welcome, and if it delivers the speed and certainty and transparency that is sought, then why would we do anything other than welcome it? But the difficulty is that planning policy's reception into the land market and the way that it tends to affect behaviour can be, quite irrational or appear quite irrational. So certainty, which is driven by an overprescription, which would have to be my view of some elements of the SPG, is likely to lead to a hiatus in transactions in the market. So, for example,
because the land won't be coming to the market.
Because the land won't be coming to the market, residential development, housing development does not operate in an enclosed and encapsulated market. It has to operate with all other competing uses. And the point that Susan was alluding to is an overly prescriptive policy background that controls only housing and the obligations and the weight of requirements against housing, and one where the viability mechanism excludes alternative use values as part of the benchmark process, because the Mayor's preferred approach is existing use value plus premium, is likely to result in landowners either withholding their land, so I won't land bank, but a landowner may choose to, or that they will seek markets that aren't residentially focused. So the issue with planning policy change is, even when it turns out to be a positive one, in my experience, is that we end up with a hiatus. We end up with a slowdown, and we call it the momentum, momentum gap. We end up with a momentum gap being created. So rather than delivering more houses, fewer houses are delivered, and it's the old rule. 35% of nothing is nothing.
Yeah.
So there is a need for a step change, and I'm certainly not disagreeing with that. But there's a need for flexibility.
But what are you finding right now, Jenny? Are you finding that land is being held back? Land that you thought would be coming to the market is now not coming to the market?
Well, London's not a singular market. It's a multiple market. There are very few transactions in the prime central London area at the moment. So what we can see, for example, is that there's a second time around. So there are a number of sites coming back to the market that have failed to attract purchases in the first instance. But there's still no incentive for a landowner to sell below what they perceive to be the market value of that land. Moving out into the outer London boroughs, actually, because a number of those that would have been active in the central London area are moving out, the degree of interest, the level of ambition for development opportunities in the outer London boroughs is increasing. But if I overlay that around a planning policy environment that is starting to look now a little bit uncertain, what we can see is more activity and more competition for consented schemes, with a beginning of a reluctance and a concern about risk and the cumulative risk generally, market and planning around unconditional bids. So we're starting to see a change between those that already have planning permission in the bag and those that may need to go through the new system.
Okay, right, complex. Graham Craig, you've got some land. You're the Commercial Development Director for Transport for London. You're sitting on a bit of land. You're working with the Mayor. What's the plan, and how are you going to support his policy?
Can you hear me? Yes. We have 5,500 acres of land.
Can everybody hear Graham okay?
How about now? Yes, you can. We've got 5,500 acres of land. We've identified 300 acres that we want to bring forward. Over the course of this year so far, we brought forward 4 sites, equates to about 1,000 homes. We're averaging 51% affordable housing on those 4 sites, and we're also doing so in a way in which we can also achieve our budget. We are looking to generate over the course of the next 6 years £1.3 billion from property development activity within Transport for London. It's about a third of all the commercial revenues that we're looking to raise, which is critical for us because we're also losing our grant from the DFT. That means we become the only transport authority in Western Hemisphere that gets no operating subsidy from the government. So from our point of view, it's absolutely critical that we unlock the value in our land. Equally, we need to do that whilst achieving, as Jules has said, the 50% affordable housing. What we've shown over the course of the last 12 months is that that can be achieved. And next year, we're raising the game. So next year, we're going from 1,000 homes, which we brought to market this year, to 3,000 homes next year. And my aim is that we should be bringing forward sites at the rate of about 1 a month. So every month, we'll bring forward a new scheme. Every month or every year, we'll be aiming for about 3,000 homes. Now, that would mean that over the course of this Mayor's time in office, for the first 4 years at least, we'll have brought forward sites that have the ability to offer 10,000 homes. Now, that's not clearly going to solve the scale of the crisis that we've got, but I think what we've done is shown how it can be done. And it's not straightforward. We've invested hugely in a property development function. I now sit on TfL's executive committee, so I'm one of 3 operational businesses within Transport for London. You've got surface transport, which runs the bus network, you've got the underground network, and then you've got commercial development. So that's, Transport for London saying one of the 3 reasons why we exist as an organisation is to unlock commercial activity, including through the providing of homes.
And what's the typical nature of your deal? How many strings are attached do you retain any value in the land thereafter?
Our default means will be that we'll enter into a joint venture. We'll generally take a 49% share in the joint venture. We want to retain a degree of control in terms of what's built, when it's built. We also, pretty much every site we've got is operationally constrained in some way. If it was possible to draw a red line round a site and put it to market, one of my predecessors would have done so over the course of the last 60 years. All the sites we've got are difficult, they're constrained, but there's huge opportunity that can be unlocked within it. What we're doing is saying actually things like the engineering, the operations, we're best able to manage that. We're not best able to build the homes, but we find a partner who does. We retain an interest, we share the developer's profit as well as the land value, and that's the means through which we can unlock the revenue whilst also being able to hit the 50% affordable housing.
Graham, as a landowner, and we've heard from the panel, that's going to be one of the key issues in delivering this mayor's vision for affordable housing, that land needs to come to the market for developers to develop. Do you think that your model is going to be an exemplar for what other developers can do, and that your model is the right model to deliver the mayor's affordable housing policy?
It's definitely the right model for TfL, of that I'm sure. What I would say is it's not something to be undertaken lightly. You know, it's taken us 5 years from a standing start in order to build not just the development team. I mean, the team that I've got at the moment is, from just a development point of view, has gone from 5 to 25 over the course of the last 18 months. We've been able to recruit in people who would never have dreamed about working for Transport for London in the past, only because we've changed the reputation that we have in the market. We've also got standalone support in terms of a finance team, a procurement team, a communications team, a legal team, because the off-the-shelf versions of those for a transport company isn't what you need for a property company. We brought in the ex-chief exec of Landsec as a chair of a non-exec director group to support me and my team, given the scale of what it is that we're doing.
Why not go the whole hog then and become the developer?
There's two things that we looked at. One is just no organisation in the country could undertake the scale of development that we're seeking to do. So whoever we brought in, or heaven forbid we try and do this all ourselves, it just wouldn't work. It's too large and our sites are too diverse. They're commercial, they're residential, they're in the outer, they're large, they're small. There isn't one answer. Another option that we looked at is, do we just set this up as a wholly separate company? Is it so large it doesn't really sit as part of Transport for London? Do we put in separate governance and everything else? What we immediately saw, and even just working that through, is if you have any separation at all between the operation and the engineering and the people who are doing the development, the land just won't come forward. If the people who are running the railway feel like they're losing control and giving their land to someone else, they will just hang on to it. You have to, it's a harder job, but you have to persuade the 30,000 people who work in TfL that it's in their interest, in London's interest, that we turn TfL from being a transport company into an organisation that's comfortable being also a major property company.
Jenny, is Taylor Wimpey desperate to get its hands on some of that TfL land?
Well, I'm very pleased to say that we're part of the TfL panel that went out to procurement a few years ago, and we've been looking at a number of the sites that come forward. We haven't been successful yet, I think, but you know,
You haven't been successful?
Not as yet. I think there's only been a few brought to the market, but we'll continue to review.
And what's prohibited you from getting involved with the sites which have already come to market?
Well, we've looked at a number. There's obviously, you know, always a range of reasons. I have to look at my whole book, my whole land holding. So it's going to be the level of investment, the amount of work in progress that's required, the design complexity, and as Graham's mentioned, some of them are quite complex in engineering and design terms. And then looking at each business carrying what I would call a balanced scorecard. Everyone can carry some risk, but it has to be managed across all of the other projects. So just up to current times, there hasn't been one that we've proven successful in our balance of risk, but we're very interested.
And we don't expect everyone to bid for every site. So we've got 13 people on the panel. and the people who are on the panel reflects the fact that we've got a wide range of sites. And of course, one thing that's been hugely important to us, given that we're talking to Taylor, Wimpey and others on a pretty much continual basis, is we're now in a position to really understand at a fairly granular level what the market is interested in. And that then means, because almost the biggest challenge we've got is, given the numbers of sites, well, what's the right sequencing of those sites? So we're continually sort of testing with the market, which ones should we be bringing forward over the course of the next 6 months, the next 12, 18 months, in order that we've got something that's not going to be attracted to all 13, but there will be people who want to work on that site with us.
Graham, thank you very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's the yes, absolutely. That's the context set. I think we should now have a discussion about what we've heard and interrogate it a little further. Please put your hands up if you want to ask a question. I'll catch your eye. I'm going to start with the gentleman here who put his hand up ages ago and has very patiently waited. Thank you very much, sir. I've got you over there and you at the back. Absolutely. This gentleman here at the front.
My name is Frank Vickery. I've worked in East London for affordable housing providers for 40 years. I wanted to redefine the issue of cheap land. I bought a lot of low-value land on the basis that the councils have to demonstrate best value, not maximum pounds, best value. And for instance, I was involved in Coin Street and purchasing that for 96p for the housing. Similarly, over the road at West Silvertown with Newham, we agreed a format with a level of affordable housing on our land at 90% by the same mechanism, that is best value. The valuers for the local authorities do not understand best value. If a local authority decides that the level of affordable housing on a site is fixed, which we did on Coin Street, the value for the land is residualised to 96p.
Yes.
And that's the way I would treat nominal value land. I would not call it cheap land because it's basically wrong. When the local authorities prioritise affordable housing, they can value the land based on the affordable housing provision. Now that's the next thing is, I think also we should reverse the viability to prioritise the 35% and to have a calculation, they call it viability, where the input of public funding in different forms, and we did this on Poplar Harker, which is 9,000 units, to put the targets, including community chest money, to run the community basis. Because on big schemes, you cannot just build and build. You have to create, particularly on regeneration of estates, a mechanism for people to grow and create their own framework.
Okay, we've got you. So how land is valued and the priorities attributed to that land are the key determinants, not necessarily its value.
I mean, it's a complicated issue, and it came up earlier about the alternative use value. And I have to say that in the SPG, it is quite specific that alternative use value can be used if it's justified. But the default position is the existing use value plus a reasonable premium.
So what would be the justification for changing it?
Well, for example, if it already had an extant planning permission for use as, for a use that had some significant value, say as a supermarket or something, and then it would be legitimate to have that value factored in rather than some sort of vacant piece of land or that was allotments, for example. But I mean, what we haven't touched on, though, and I can't, it would be unforgivable if I was on here and only had just spoken about the new products that the Mayor's introducing on for affordability, such as London Living Rent, because you did ask me the question about, well, what about the nurses? Because that only represents. What about the nurses?
Yes.
And trainee nurses on low wages? the 35% rising to 50%, the strategic target that we want to achieve overall, that can be broken down into different types of products. And we've been talking a bit about the intermediate products like London Living Rent and shared ownership. But 30%, the Mayor will be expecting 30% of what's brought forward to be social rented. So that's at existing council rent levels. And then the remaining 40% is up for negotiation between the Mayor and the local authority about what will work best in that locality. So it is perfectly feasible that a development, of all the affordable housing in a development, as much as 70% of it could be for social rent.
Okay. The gentleman over here had his hand up. Yeah. Got you. There's one at the back, and I'll come to you. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm interested in the issue of, sounds a bit echoey. I'm interested in the issue of, like that. Okay, I'm interested in the issue of the local authorities that are doing developments at the moment and redeveloping housing estates. Where we've got in Barnet, for example, large housing estates that, for Barnet Council, which are being redeveloped with possibly only about 30% retention of social housing on those estates. Now that doesn't really bode well for the future if estates that are in the hands of local authorities are just being allowed to go for private development. But even nearby, we recently heard in Brent Council, which is a Labour authority in this case, the development of the Wembley area at rents of £1,600 minimum, which doesn't seem to make sense in my sense. As far as I'm concerned, no one earns that sort of money that can afford to pay that sort of rent unless you're in a very high wage bracket. So what I'm saying to the local authorities and to the GLC is that hardball has to be played on the issue of social, on the issue of affordable rent and on the issue of social housing. It's not all a question of developers wanting to retain their profits or make the best out of it. We get the situation, for example, for people who own their properties where we can have negative equity. Just hard luck, isn't it, people say. Sorry, but that's the way the market works. Well, no. The same can happen with local authorities and the GLC when they create a situation where negative equity for land banks can happen, and it's just hard luck that they have to accept it and get on with the development. Because if everyone else that are individuals in society can accept that, then they have to accept it as well. So I think there should be some hardball played to get social rents down.
Ben, do you want to pick this up?
Yes. Well, I think it's true to say, and this has been picked up at the GLA and in government by the recently sacked Lord Heseltine, that there have been lapses, I would put it that way, in the way in which estates have been regenerated and redeveloped. And that's, I don't think, anyone's particular fault, except to say that the policy framework that surrounds these kinds of projects has kind of relaxed to the point that some of the problems that the questioner stated have been revealed, particularly lately. So the GLA is consulting on a much more robust and sensible framework now, by means of which all of the options for an estate improvement should be considered with the full involvement of the residents, and that at the outset of that, the landowner, the local authority, sets out in very clear and understandable terms what the deal would be for the residents of that estate, including things like the right to stay, the right to return, the rental levels that they can expect, and all of those sorts of things. And when that's done properly, we've just become involved in one in Wandsworth with Taylor Wimpey, as it happens. When that's done properly and the residents' charter is set out, that makes it completely clear to everybody that their hopes and fears can be laid out. And when all of the options are very thoroughly assessed, and then there is a transparent process by means of which the people who live in and around the place can select the option that they want, then it works okay. I accept that there are places where it hasn't worked well, but there are some very good exemplars. Another one is South Acton in Ealing, where
But Ben, how do you get a situation where in some boroughs or situations it works well, in others it works to the detriment of the local community? I mean, how does that happen? How do you create an infrastructure where fairness abounds as opposed to it's just happenstance?
Well, I do very much regret that the coalition government, when it came in, pulped all the guidance.
But given there has, what
what we're now getting back to is a much more clear and straightforward framework from the GLA, and Heseltine, God bless him, has come up with a very similar framework on behalf of the Department for Local Communities, and in my view they're robust and they will work.
So is there a case, Jules, where you're a soft touch?
Well, for the previous 8 years, before the current mayor, apparently affordability was judged to be 80% of market rent. And that could be the case where the gentleman's question is based upon, where someone redevelops an estate and it's replaced by affordable housing, and affordability is that 80% of the local market rate. Under this mayor, that's totally unacceptable. It's, as I've outlined previously, broken down into different sorts of tenure, and also on estate regeneration schemes, this mayor has said that there can be no net loss of social rented floor space. Whatever else is done with the estate and whatever is that...
Can he implement that? I mean, what can he do if a local authority chooses to ignore it?
Anything that comes before, anything that triggers mayoral intervention, so being more than 150 units, and probably most estate regenerations would exceed that, they would come before the mayor at stage 1 and stage 2, and the mayor would not agree something that sees any loss of social floor space.
Thank you, Jules. There's a gentleman at the back who's been very patient. I got you.
Hi, I represent a local neighbourhood planning forum, but I'm quite surprised that when the mayor is looking to get more and more affordable housing, yet TfL are willing to sell their land to the highest bidder.
Okay, TfL?
We're not, as it happens, selling our land to the highest bidder. What we are doing is where we award a site on those in which we're looking to generate income, or where the priority is income, we actually award it more on the quality of the design than we do on the price. And that's because, well, in part a belief that if you get the quality right, you'll get more long-term value than you would do just from who's going to give most money. But what we're also doing is the only way in which we can deliver £1.3 billion and 50% affordable housing is to take a balanced view across the portfolio. And that doesn't mean that you've got 0% affordable housing here and 100% there. What it's saying is that as a minimum, we will be compliant with the Mayor's policy of 35%. But in some sites, we will concentrate our efforts and accept less revenue in order to get up above 50%. And by doing that, that then means that we can generate the money which is required to reinvest to improve the transport system, not least because the more efficient and more widespread and improved the transport system is, the more that helps unlock development activity across the capital.
Okay, so did you want to come back on that? I saw you pick up a microphone. No, you're happy with that. Okay, this gentleman here, please. Yeah, right. And then the lady there, I've got you, and then you. Yeah.
Hello, Sean Curtin, I'm a surveyor. Besides my day job, I do two volunteering jobs. One on a Wednesday with a youth group for young people that runs in the evening, takes children from school, and the other one is once a month at the Connection charity in Trafalgar Square. And through that, I get to see the absolute misery, which we haven't sort of focused on, that the current housing policy causes. There's not affordable rent. A lot of the children that go to the youth group, which I help run, are from single parent backgrounds, and a continual problem is that the rents are continually, annually increased by estate agents. They get to the limit where the family or the mother can't afford it even though they're working, so they have to go sort of live somewhere else. There's nowhere to find, so a lot of people are sort of made temporarily homeless. Another one is that the rents are very high, but they're subsidised by the local authority through housing benefit, and a lot of the landlords aren't actually living in the UK. So we're getting buy-to-let investors who are being subsidised by the state to charge exorbitant rents. So I was very enthused to hear Jules saying that we're rolling out this London living rent. It can't happen a moment too soon because we are in a crisis. We're sitting here all living in rather, well, listening to Will, rather expensive £1 million houses plus and having a nice life. But there are a hell of a lot of people that are really suffering. They're working, and it is the industry, particularly estate agents, that are causing the misery. I'd like to ask Ben, had Reba thought of doing a league table on how the developers were doing with that 35% target? Produce it every 6 months, and let's see how is Taylor Wimpey doing, how is Savills doing? And I'd like to ask Jenny and Suzanne, how are you doing on the 35% target? Have you achieved it in London? Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Lots of questions there. I don't have that flat anymore, sadly. Okay. So, you know. So lots of questions there, and let's start with you, Ben. And this idea there should be transparency and some holding to account on these figures, because they're easy figures in a political speech for the mayor to make. 50%, 35%. It sounds great, but who's holding him and those figures to account?
Well, I mean, it's not currently one of our thoughts. No, interesting idea. Well, I'll take it back. And put it to Jane Duncan, who's sitting 2 rows behind you. Put it in her in tray. What we do at the Institute is exemplify quality and best practice. And we have award schemes nationwide and in London which do that. And increasingly, we're going to be focusing on the contribution of the client and the social outcomes of the schemes, as well as their aesthetic merit. So we're very much on the whole question of, you know, what is the purpose of our profession? And the purpose of our profession is not just, and though it's important, to produce environments that are beautiful, is to produce environments that are sustainable, both socially, economically, and in terms of the natural environment. So all of these things are of critical importance, and I very much accept your challenge. We'll take it back.
Jules, I just want to come to you as well on the point which is kind of behind a lot of what you were saying, which has driven the market to a certain extent, which is foreign investors or corporate investors or great big companies who've registered overseas. Is there any policy to stop that happening, to take that particular driver out of the market? So there's a lot of, well, we've all go around London and we can see there's great big tower blocks with nobody in them.
Well, it is something that the Mayor's very concerned about, but rather than just acting on an anecdote, he's commissioned, I think it's the LSE, to undertake a study of this to actually get some facts on which he can take action. But kind of on a related point, and going back to a point that one of the panel made about the perhaps some of the negative effects, the negative impacts that some policies can have on perhaps people bringing forward developments, and if there's less development, then consequently there's less affordable housing that can be produced. That's why I think that, and the Mayor believes that we really have to get motoring on the build-to-rent sector. This is something that is in its infancy in this country relative to Europe. And that we ought to, and there is beginning to be more and more interest now from the pension funds and investors about actually a long-term sustainable return through rental rather than a quick windfall from flipping a site a few times and a rush to get it developed out. And then actually, it's quite understandable that if you own a big plot of land and you're bringing forward housing on it, you don't want to do it all at once and depress the values. You end up drip feeding it out, and we do find that. And I'm not accusing anyone there of land banking. It's if you own something and you wouldn't rush to sell it if you could get more of it for money over time. So we need to actually think of ways of bringing forward housing in which that there would be in a way that there would be enthusiasm from investors and home builders to bring units forward, homes forward, and in a way that is, the Mayor can effectively set these tariffs on affordability.
We haven't got much time left. Susan, are you seeing a marked shift in the amount of properties coming to the market or developments being created based around the rental market, as opposed to so build to rent? You mean? Yes.
I think yes. I think I'll just echo what Jules said.
But a marked shift, not just it's business as
It's
usual.
incremental. It is growing, and I think that we have the noises we're getting from central government at the moment in terms of support for build to rent is really, really encouraging. So with the previous administration, a lot of the policy was aimed at creating homeowners. A lot of focus went into that. That changed. The current administration want a wider range of tenure and are much more supportive of build to rent. So, this small industry tenure is set to grow, so I do think we're going to see a lot more of it, and it will help address the problems of supply, because I think fundamentally what drives rent rises in London and anywhere is the lack of supply. There's simply, the availability isn't there. So if we can get institutional investors to bring forward good quality homes where, the tenants can stay there long term, more than 6 months, 3 years, etc., and give them some stability, it can be a really good thing.
Okay, I've got one question. I'll take it from you, madam, because we've got 1 minute. Is it a quickie? Okay.
Hi, I'm Stevie. I'm a pioneer of the Eco Land Trust. My question to you is, would you agree that the soundest models for actually land ownership and then good use of the land is the National Trust, for example, and the RSPB, where they take wonderful land and take it out of the marketplace and then make it available for what it's meant to be used for? So would you agree with that? And on that basis, shouldn't we be reclaiming our land from investors and whatever else, and shareholder thingies and all the rest of it, and having, using our land for properly designed use, and in that case, the Eco Land Trust type of model.
Got it, fantastic. Okay, I'm going to give that to you, Jules.
I'm sorry, I don't know enough about the models.
But the idea that would the mayor ever sort of seize land and say, right, we're having this?
No government and no government, Western government, is going to sanction seizing land from anybody.
It would have been a good story, though, wouldn't it? Okay, that is our hour up. The panel will be loitering around for a bit, so if you wanted to ask a question and weren't able to get it in, please come and speak to them as they get their microphones switched off. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much to our panel as well for their heartfelt and thoughtful comments. Could you give them a quick round of applause? And in a quarter of an hour, we'll be back talking about healthy places and making these happen. How do you create homes, houses, offices, spaces where people live happily and healthily? In a quarter of an hour.